So this is a brand new type of epoxy system called terrazzo cast, and it's way thicker and way more durable than standard epoxy applications. It gives you this super cool polished stone hard coat look that I've honestly never seen before. So I'm going to show you exactly how to install one of these from start to finish. Now the first and arguably most important step in this process is going to be the prep work. That starts off by grinding your concrete floor. The reason that's so important is that the concrete usually has some type of contaminant all throughout the top surface. That can mean anything from dust, debris, or the worst possibility is oil. Some people tell you could prep the concrete by acid etching, and sometimes that works, but sometimes that doesn't. We never recommend it because that's not a coin flip we want to take with any of these systems. Grinding basically guarantees that you remove any of those contaminants by removing the top surface of that concrete altogether. Not only that, but it also opens up the pores of the concrete, so any type of primer or any type of system is going to adhere to that floor a lot better than it would otherwise. And the next aspect of prep work is going to be patching, right? Even though terrazzo cast is a semi-self-leveling surface, any decent void is going to telegraph over to the finished surface, and that's not something you want. Larger voids are backfilled with sand and then flooded with the GCF crack filler. Smaller hairline cracks are flooded with a crack filler completely neat. I have a whole in-depth video on every single type of void you can encounter and what to do with it. You could watch that video afterwards if you want to. But in this video, I'm doing it on a sample board, not an actual concrete floor. So I'm going to be using a bunch of cement boards stapled up against each other. This is perfectly fine for a sample piece, but I definitely wouldn't do this type of thing on an actual project. And in this case, I'm using a different crack filler called the GEP. But I'm not going to get into that. Like I said, I have a whole video on all the different types of patching compounds and materials. But what I will talk about is the next extremely important step, which is a primer. The primer I'm going to be using is the GEC 10W water-based epoxy. And what the water-based epoxy primer does is a couple of things. The most obvious is it covers up that color of the original concrete with a color that's going to be a better base coat for that terrazzo cast system you have. So it's important to choose a primer color that corresponds to the color of the terrazzo cast system. If your money coat is a really dark color like carbon, you're going to use a black primer. If it's a really light color like ivory, you're going to use a white primer. My money coat is the granite, so I'm using the gray primer. And the second really important thing a primer does is it closes the pores of that concrete. Right? Think of a concrete almost like an extremely hard sponge. It's got a lot of voids, a lot of air inside of it. If you pour any type of liquid on top of it, it's going to seep deep into that concrete, but the air has to escape somewhere, so it travels up and starts bubbling up on top of the surface. It's the same exact concept here. If you try to do the terrazzo cast without a primer, it's going to be riddled with bubbles and you're going to ruin the entire project. And when you're applying that primer, make sure that you back roll. That means if you're rolling north-south, north-south, then you switch over to east-west, east-west. That makes sure you get proper coverage across the entire thing. There's not too much primer here, too little primer there. Back rolling gives you nice, consistent coverage. Now once that primer coat is cured and you're in that recoat window, you can start mixing up the actual money coat, the terrazzo cast. And before applying that terrazzo cast, there's one thing that you should always do, and that's put on a pair of spike shoes. Exactly how it sounds, those spike shoes have little spikes at the bottom, which makes sure that when you're walking across that terrazzo mix, you're not leaving any footprints, and you're minimizing your chances of slipping and falling. You're basically minimizing the surface area your foot has to give you little ghost shoes. You can step all over the material, and no one's going to notice. So this is our small kit of the terrazzo cast. It covers about 50 to 60 square feet, and inside of this bucket you're going to find three components. You've got the part A, the part B, and the actual aggregate, which is going to give you that nice granite-like finish. Now the mixing ratio for this is really weird whether you do it by volume or by weight, so I don't recommend breaking up this kit unless you really have to, and even then I definitely recommend doing it with a very precise scale. The easiest thing is just using the 60 square foot kit for 60 square feet. And when you're mixing this material, start off with all the liquid components first inside the bucket, get it mixed up and catalyzed, and then start slowly adding that aggregate in there. That way it's going to mix up a lot easier, a lot better, and a lot faster. And just like any other type of resinous product, you don't want to keep it in the bucket. You want to get it out of that bucket onto the floor and spread out to the correct thickness as soon as possible. If you don't do that, that large volume all concentrated directly into that bucket is going to set up way too quick and you're going to ruin the material. And you want to get a consistent thickness across the entire project, not only so that you get that 50 to 60 square feet for the small kit, but also so that there's not too much over here, too little over there. A regular squeegee in this case will not help you. This is a relatively thick material, so you want to build it to about 1/8 of an inch. The way you guarantee you get 1/8 of an inch across the entire surface is either with a gauge rake set to 1/8 of an inch, or by using a V-notch squeegee. It's really important that the size of the V-notch squeegee is 3/8. That's the one that's going to give you the correct thickness. I actually know some guys who use a 1/2-inch squeegee, but they get a lot less coverage. And notice how this material is being spread out very beautifully, but you do see those lines running up behind it. It looks kind of like a freshly plowed field. The way you get rid of that is either with a spike roller, or in my case, I'm using a loop roller. That breaks apart that texture, makes it randomized, and it also helps out with making sure you get a nice even coverage of everything, just nudging that material along just a little bit to help it self-level itself. And then you keep going and working with that notch squeegee, and take a look at the way the squeegee is being held. It's not being held at a perfect 90-degree angle, it's slightly angled towards the area that doesn't have the material. That makes sure I don't get any flooding or spillover of material onto the area where I already have the correct thickness of material. Now, other than that, the orientation doesn't really matter. Whether you want to push the material or pull the material with that spike squeegee, both are good as long as you're taking your time. The last thing you want to do is try to rush it. You're not trying to get this material spread out as fast as humanly possible. You want to work with the material, not against it. Work with the material as it flows, walking slowly behind, and that's going to give you the best results. And now you just repeat these steps until the whole surface is fully covered, and all you got to do is wait for it to cure. Now the terrazzo cast is cured, it's got this beautiful glass-like finish to it, and you can leave it as is. Leaving it like this is going to leave it as glossy as it could possibly get, but we always recommend putting a top coat on it just so that you get that scratch resistance and UV resistance that our top coats provide. If you're using any of our polyurethane top coats, you have a 24-hour window between putting down that terrazzo cast and being able to put a sealer on without needing any type of sanding. If you waited over 24 hours, you want to sand that surface and degloss it just so you get a nice mechanical bond between the terrazzo cast and your top coat. Our polyurethane top coats come in a bunch of finishes. You can get gloss, semi-gloss, but what I want to do is a flat finish. We've seen what it looks like super glossy, now let's see what it looks like super matte. The product I'm using is the GU20WF water-based polyurethane, and this process is going to remind you a little bit of the primer. The trick with these polyurethane top coats though is putting on a very thin layer. You don't want to go thick. If you go too thick, you're going to leave roller marks, or you could even cause the polyurethane to not cure correctly. So we're applying this polyurethane super thin, not only for a proper application, but also to get a much better coverage. And again, you got to make sure that you back roll that sealer. Not only so you get a proper coverage across everything, but back rolling also reduces any type of roller marks you could see. Now all you got to do is wait for that top coat to fully cure and your project is basically done. But this is not the end of the video. You can see how the top coat completely deglossed that surface, and if I'm honest, I don't like it. I liked it a lot more when it was that glossy surface, so I'm going to go ahead and apply a gloss water-based polyurethane, which is something that you could do. If you don't like the finish on your top coat, you could always apply another finish right on top of that one. Sanding isn't required again if you're within that reapplication time zone, but the most important thing is that if you used a water-based polyurethane, you can only put a water-based polyurethane on top. And same thing vice versa. If you used a solvent-based polyurethane, you use a solvent-based polyurethane on top of that. So that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm applying the GU20W, the gloss version of that previous sealer, and again making sure I back roll the entire thing. Once that cures up, this is what the finished product looks like, and it's still not as glossy as it would have been if I started off with a gloss top coat, just because the original shape of the matte top coat has a little bit of orange peel texture. The gloss sealer would have that orange peel texture, but not nearly as much as it does right now. I want you guys to comment down below if you want to see another video where instead of doing the matte finish, I do immediately a gloss finish sealer, just to see what the fully protected version of this looks like when it's glossy from the start. And even if you don't want to see that, comment down below which color you want me to do the next video on, because Basalt is my favorite color, but it might not be yours. I know some of you are definitely going to want to see carbon, but either way, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next video.